You referenced escalation. Of course, that's one of the factors that we always consider, but it's certainly not the only factor.
The U.S. Secretary of State arriving in Kiev with his British counterpart in tow. Antony Blinken commenting on the possible use of Western long-range missiles to strike Russia, despite the clear and present danger. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his British counterpart arriving in Kiev and saying that they always consider the dangers of escalation when giving Ukraine a green light to use long-range weapons to strike Russia.
You referenced escalation. Of course, that's one of the factors that we always consider, but it's certainly not the only factor, and it's not necessarily a dispositive factor. We have provided, as you know, extraordinary support to Ukraine over these more than 2 years. Not just training, not just money, but among our most sophisticated weapon systems, again, tied to what their needs are, tied to what can make them most effective.
It doesn't seem that they do care about escalation, but that's not to suggest that they haven't been escalating all along for over a year and a half. Remember, Storm Shadow and Scalp, the French version of Storm Shadow, have been used against the Crimean Bridge. We've seen civilians killed there in Russia. We've seen energy infrastructure struck deep inside Russia. And these game changers, the Leopard, the Javelin missile, we've seen them all come. None of them have actually changed the game. And it's not just us saying that, it's the top men on the NATO side, if you like, saying it. Let's have a listen to them.
I don't believe what is stopping the United States. I don't believe one specific capability will be decisive, and I stand by that comment. I think Ukraine has a pretty significant capability of its own to address targets that are well beyond the range of ATACMS or even Storm Shadow, for that matter.
There's also a sense that Russia is advancing on the battlefield. We've had a counter-offensive beginning in Kursk as well over the last 72 hours. So the sense in Russia is we're going to continue to achieve the goals we set out for the special military operation. Now, interestingly, we got an exclusive chance to listen to Sergei Ryabkov, who's the deputy Russian foreign minister, and he echoed those sentiments. Let's have a listen to him.
It's troubling, it's dangerous, it's threatening, but our resolve to achieve all goals of the special military operation are unwavered as ever. We do think that, as was before with the previous deliveries, all will be destroyed and our adversaries on the battlefield will be defeated. No doubt. So no goals, as they said before them, will be achieved through this. But dangers and risks, they grow. And the U.S. literally begins to look into the abyss. They live in a world of dark fantasies which they develop for themselves, phantoms that haunt them. One of those being an idea that a nuclear power, which is Russia, can be defeated on the battlefield. It may well end very badly for them and for all of those who simply close their eyes for this very dire reality. We make no difference whatsoever between our territories, which became so as territories of the Russian Federation through democratic vote of people there and all the procedures that made it possible for those people to reunite with Russia. These people used their right for self-determination.
Billions and billions of dollars, billions of pounds being pumped into the Ukrainian fiasco, essentially. I mean, it's an unwinnable conflict, and I think most in the West would accept that. But it doesn't stop these two men, Mr. Blinken and Mr. Lamy, almost competing with each other to see who can shout loudest about how much they want to support Ukraine and how much money they're going to send.
We're announcing $325 million in new funding to help repair Ukraine's energy and electric grid. And we'll rally additional support from the G7 plus countries when we have a meeting of the Energy Coordination Group in the next couple of weeks. I'm also announcing today $290 million in new humanitarian support.
President Zelensky expressed gratitude and thanks for Britain's $3 billion a year commitment that will continue for as long as this fight is needed. The UK commitment is not just for this winter. We're talking about a 100-year partnership because we stand with Ukraine for the long haul.
And this is all happening while Mr. Lamy's government has just cut aid to pensioners. A winter fuel allowance, which was given to elderly people in the United Kingdom. This is a big issue for voters in the UK, and it's also a big issue in an election year for people in the United States. They're concerned about gas prices, they're concerned about the economy, and they're concerned about inflation. But it doesn't seem Mr. Lamy is concerned, or Mr. Blinken, with Mr. Lamy saying that he's willing to support Ukraine for 100 years. Now, the Russians may not have got the memo, as they seem to be now advancing on all fronts. So we'll watch this case very carefully.
Well, we were talking with the former Pentagon security analyst, Michael Maloof, and he says that at first the plan was to allow long-range missiles to strike military targets. But as he says, civilians always become the inevitable targets.
I'm afraid what Blinken served to the world was another one of those famous word salads. He made no sense. It will inevitably escalate. Here are a number of considerations. The ATACMS, as well as the Storm Shadows, each are nuclear capable. They have varying ranges up to almost 200 miles. The whole notion was to allow for the longer range to strike missile bases and military targets. The inevitable targets are all civilian. There are very few military targets that have been hit in Russia. It's been mostly civilian targets. And Washington should be very concerned about that. And this is what will get the ire of Moscow up to start taking some deliberative action. They've got to protect their citizens. And as a consequence, I see them, if okay is given to use the long-range missiles and they start hitting these civilian areas, then you're going to, I think Moscow will begin to move its tactical nukes up close to Ukraine. And it's already announced a change in its nuclear doctrine. We're at a very critical point here in this effort.